Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the BP Harmony podcast. I'm delighted to be here with Polly Wiseman, and they are an influencer on social media that I started following a few months ago. I've appreciated their content, their vulnerability, and their style. And what caught my attention was the tagline on their Instagram, which reads, "Shows, clothes, highs and lows." It's a sort of lifestyle Instagram page that is very open about their lived experience with bipolar disorder, and then still expressing who they are. In BP Harmony, I tend to be much more didactic, much more authoritative, that there are these five pillars that can lead to stability in one's life. And when Polly and I connected online, they had an appreciation for my approach, and I had an appreciation for Polly's approach. So we're going to talk to an influencer who is open about bipolar disorder and what that looks like, some of the results, the consequences, the risks, and then even how to do social media in a way that is not detrimental to one's health, specifically mental health. So we've lined up a few questions for you. And before we begin, I just wanted to give Polly a moment to introduce in themselves, and we'll get started with the questions right after.
Hi, I'm Polly Wiseman, and I'm a theatre maker, I suppose, from London. And I used to be a fashion journalist, and I also write about bipolar disorder. And those three things together gave me the title of my account: Shows, Clothes, Highs and Lows. My favorite thing is to connect with other people who have lived with mental illness and work in the arts. So I'm really excited to be here today. And I love Imran's account, which has a more structured feel than my account.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that as a different style and a more cohesive way
Yeah.
to do bipolar.
Awesome. Well, I'm just realizing that I have someone else's URL on your slides. So I am just going to quickly remove that. But we did have Sarah J. D. Neumann on a previous podcast, and she talked about um, her approach with art therapy. So it's good to see that in all the literature about the devastating effects of bipolar disorder, that one of the consistent positive things I've seen for people who receive this diagnosis is that these people tend to be creatives, and they tend to be able to channel uh, from maybe beyond themselves creative energy when in the highs and lows of life. Um, so yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
So let's begin with your very catchy tagline. How did you come up with it, and what does it mean to you?
Well, originally it was just shows and clothes. And that was because I'm a theatre maker. I run an immersive theatre company called Fire Raisers. Trained as an actor, I write plays as well. And so that initially was the main focus of my account. I decided to add in the clothes bit because I used to work as a fashion journalist with a particular interest in sustainable style. So I wanted to highlight that as well. And then a couple of years ago, while I was a bit manic, I started posting all over social media about my strange experiences. And so I had a choice whether to, when I sort of was stable again, whether to delete all those posts or whether to just own it and say, yeah, okay, I live with bipolar disorder and sometimes I might come across different online. And so, because I'd had really lovely people getting in contact who knew a bit about what it was like to live with mental illness, and they seemed to enjoy my posts and get useful things from them. So then I added the highs and lows in brackets bipolar to my
Okay.
description.
Yeah. It's interesting you didn't make that distinction that I've made in social media where I have one channel that's all like bipolar related, then I have my personal stuff, then I have my filming stuff, then I have like my community stuff. What's the thought process behind kind of putting it all in one?
Honestly, there is none. I just I think it's only relatively recently I realized that people don't just put out whatever's happening to them online, that it's curated.
Yeah,
So, to be quite honest, I just put everything out there, and now I've found some fun combinations. Like I'm doing a series where I style up by the looks of bipolar celebrities. So I dressed up a bit like Kurt Cobain for one of them. Someone's asked me to be Jean-Claude Van Damme, which will be hilarious.
are these
And,
two characters
um,
they had mental illness?
yeah, Kurt Cobain sort of as posthumous. I'm not sure if it was posthumous or in his lifetime, but apparently he did have bipolar disorder, and Jean-Claude Van Damme definitely has bipolar disorder. So
Wow, I didn't know
they
that
also
about
have.
John
Oh,
Claude.
yeah. No, it's out there on the internet, and I think it was a relatively recent, probably sort of 2017, 2018 thing, maybe that he got diagnosed. And so therefore I'm with the styling up the looks of bipolar celebrities, I'm mixing mental health
Interesting.
content with the style and shows. I'm making a show about bipolar and psychosis. So there again, I'm bringing my theatre experience to share,
Yeah.
to challenge stigma really around bipolar and psychosis.
Yeah, let me know when that happens. I'd love to fly over and watch the
Yeah,
show.
that would be
But it's
great.
interesting that that's what you're doing because a lot of inspiration I got when I was ill was looking at people who are highly successful with this diagnosis and just conveying this idea that while I was in the crippling stages of depression, that doesn't matter if you have this diagnosis, you can still reach the pinnacles of, you know, career success, personal success. So I appreciate you being a part of that. Um,
No, absolutely you can, but I think also it doesn't matter if you don't reach the pinnacles of celebrity, because I think the other thing that can be slightly hard to deal with, I know when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and I was 19, I think my mum and people were trying to go, look, Stephen Fry has bipolar and he's done really well, and Carrie Fisher has bipolar and she's
yeah.
done really well. And then I'm kind of thinking, well, I'm not doing very well. I must be really bad at being bipolar.
Um,
So I think it's finding inspiration from celebrities, but also kind of making your own way through life and finding your own expression.
I really like that. That's even helpful for me. So thank you for that perspective.
Well, thank you for yours, because I think it doesn't hurt to say that this is not a limiting illness necessarily.
Necessarily correct. Correct. Hmm. So being that you have been so open about your diagnosis and you have, I appreciate that you're you're honest in saying I'm not curating my content. It's just a natural expression of really everything and anything. And you have summarized it in these three main pillars: shows, clothes, highs, and lows. But have you faced any stigma in the influencer space and your career because of your openness about mental illness and, mental health awareness?
So when I was first diagnosed, when I was 19, I was a student at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. I was trained to be an actor, and I had to go to hospital a couple of maybe three times whilst I was doing this 3-year course. And when I came back after I think the last hospitalization, the school told me never to tell anyone or I wouldn't get any work. And the psychiatrist I had at the time also told my parents, well, some of my patients never work. So I was kind of 20, 21, and I really felt like I'd been written off and my life was over. So
This was in the 21st century, 20th century.
yeah, late 90s. So
Okay.
it's a while ago, but not,
Yeah.
back in
The
the
reason I ask is because in America, it's become less stigmatized. and it's much more open to talk about as compared to the 90s. I was asking because you're in the UK to see from a historical perspective if views or stigma, notions of stigma around mental illness have changed.
Um, yeah, I think what's been really freeing for me is when I started posting online and I didn't get sort of people were lovely. People left really supportive comments. People said, "Oh my God, that's my experience too," or
Yeah.
they told me about things that they'd experienced, and so suddenly, I think all my life I felt very ashamed and alone with bipolar disorder because I was trying to pretend that I didn't have it, that it wasn't affecting my life. So to finally find people online who understood my experiences and didn't judge me, and just reading things that I can't begin to express, the reading things that someone else had written and say, oh my God, that I could have written that. That's my experience. And I didn't realize anyone else had felt like that. That that's been so amazing for me. And I'm so grateful to the influencers like you and like the other people I'm connected with on Instagram particularly. I'm so grateful for your solidarity.
And so I guess not, it's been more a positive response as an influencer because you are advocating on behalf of those who may be feeling alone, and democratizing knowledge around what my content is very much like escape bipolar disorder with natural remedies and yoga and acupuncture. And what I admire about yours is that it's while you're in the journey, you still can be expressive and live and enjoy life. I think my own approach is like go into this incubator cave space and come out, fresh and new. So it's been helpful for even for my own approach. But then just in your career in shows and clothing, fashion, have you faced any barriers or roadblocks in career progression because of your openness about mental illness?
Well, I suppose I wasn't open for all those years, and what would happen is I would have a great idea, I would run with it, I would get quite far because I was a bit manic and I was very confident and very full of ideas. And then usually I would end up in psychosis and being hospitalized, and then I would crash and I would have lost that opportunity. So then I'd have to start all over again. So I suppose that's why I was writing, acting, directing, doing journalism, doing promo stuff, really lots of different careers because I think they kept blowing up in my face. And I went to Oxford University for all of 3 weeks before I had to drop out. So I kept
Oh, wow.
getting these these great opportunities, which I
Yeah.
then couldn't fulfill because I had bipolar disorder that was sort of badly controlled, I
Hmm.
suppose.
Hmm.
Um, so no, I
But,
haven't
but
had the
you weren't
career I would
open
have.
about it.
Sorry, say.
You're saying that you were not open about it in the beginning?
No, because I'd been told not to tell people, and yeah, it was a different time, and I think the thing was you had to be reliable in the arts. I mean, in most jobs, but there were so many people wanting to act or direct or write that you have to earn it by being reliable and always delivering the goods, which is hard to do if you have a very unpredictable health condition.
Hmm.
I think now we're better at, certainly with my theatre company, I'm, as part of the show I'm doing about bipolar and psychosis, I'm writing an access document for myself, which basically lays out the conditions under which I'm going to do good work and not go crazy, essentially.
Hmm.
So we're sort of trying to relook at the whole the show must go on and you must work till you drop culture and trying to make that more healthy.
Walk me through the journey of Polly, who was not open about it, to Polly today, who is open about it.
Um, So I suppose I don't know what it's like not to have bipolar disorder because I suppose I first started having symptoms when I was about 14. Um, so I suppose I always thought it was I didn't know what on earth was going on, and I suppose I thought it was something that was wrong with me, that I was weak or I didn't know how to adult, I didn't know how to live life. Um, So I suppose that was a lot of years of not like I was medicated and then I would go off the medication and then I'd get sick and then I would have more medication and at no point was I really offered any proper like talking therapy or anything. And also the experiences in the hospitals have left me, has apparently it turns out, I only found out this year, apparently it's left me with PTSD as well. So
Oh,
I think
I know
the
that how
two
that goes.
things,
Just the experience of mania in itself is traumatizing.
yeah, that can and the hospitals here are quite unsafe and horrible. So um yeah, anyway, so I think it was quite damaging, all of that. Um, just sort of trying to deal with all this on my own, to not tell anyone, to carry on working, to deal with having, yeah, been psychotic, being sectioned, been in very unsafe hospitals, and just not really learning much about how to live with bipolar. I had quite a lot of the books, but I just decided I didn't have bipolar, so I threw them all away.
Mhm.
Like that would make it go away. So I suppose it really wasn't until I think over lockdown, like lots of people, my mental health deteriorated. And then kind of 2020, end of 2022, yeah, I started going into an elevated mood. I guess I went a bit manic. And so then, yes, I was sort of forced to realize that yes, because I always, if I'm not in an episode, I always think I don't have bipolar. After all these years, I still go, no, obviously I don't. I was making it up. So it took a while to kind of go, no, this is what's happening as you're going manic. And so then I had to go and seek help, first of all, from the GP and then the community mental health team.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, some of it was lovely. The world was all rainbow colored and glowing, and everyone was lovely. And I was chatting away to everyone. And I decided I was going to raise money for Bipolar UK by wearing this crown and walking around town with a badge that said, "Ask me about my crown." So then I was just chatting away to people and basically saying, "Give me money for this cause,"
Oh,
which
wow.
they did because, I was all friendly and happy and confident and chatty. And yeah, so the world was lovely and glowing and rainbow colored, and the people were great. And I was having a spiritual awakening, and this was exactly how life was meant to be. And then I suppose when I really couldn't sleep and it felt like my head was full of bees and I started hearing voices and things, then it became not fun.
Mm,
And
yeah.
yeah, so, but then, yeah, I was medicated and I sort of managed to come back down to earth again.
So it was a period of having to go through it alone and then facing the consequences of, getting off of medication completely. And then now you are open about it and talking to people. Was there a moment in 2022 when you had that manic episode and you went back on medication where you decided, okay, this is when I want to start being open about this experience that I'm having?
It wasn't really a sensible decision in that I started posting when I was manic. So
Oh, okay, okay.
just put out all these amazing things that were going on in the world, and I told everyone I loved them, and just sort of the usual manic stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and so no, it's by accident that I did that, and then yeah, after I was stable again, I had the choice to delete all those posts or to just say, well, this is my life. This is what happens with bipolar disorder. And it can be funny, it can be terrible, it can be life limiting, it can be life expanding, but this is the reality of it. And I
Mm.
suppose I've
And so you
stuck with
chose to
that
keep the
since.
content. You chose to
Sorry.
keep it. You chose to keep it.
Yes, yeah, and also because of the connection, I love to connect to people, and those posts had connected me to lots of amazing people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's how we got connected.
Mm.
Okay, that explains to me the thought process or lack thereof.
Yes, do as I say, not as I do. Someone like, don't do what I did. Yes.
That's funny. Okay. So, I mean, this is a good segue for this next question, which is, do your shifts in mood influence your creativity and style? If so, how? And this is, I think I'm interested always to talk to artistically inclined folks because, Vincent van Gogh and current day musicians like Demi Lovato, Selena Gomez. I've always been, even I'm a filmmaker and
Yeah.
a writer, and sometimes I do like to lean in on that heightened energy. I don't want to stay in there for too long, but I don't know how you might use the lower energy and the higher energy for your content creation and style, and any advice on how to go about it.
Um, I suppose first and foremost, because I'm usually making shows, like writing and devising and performing in shows. So when I'm in a high mood, the flat is covered in post-its everywhere with a million ideas. I'll wake up in the middle of the night. I won't be able to sit still. I'll be dancing around and sticking post-its on the walls, and I think every idea is brilliant and all of that. And then, so yeah, lots of ideas. Your brain moves very quickly. You make connections, which is useful for creativity, to be quite honest. Um, and then I think you kind of write manic and then edit when you're stable or possibly slightly depressed, because then you can try and order all these thoughts
Yeah,
and find the sort of through line. And some of the ideas will be completely bonkers, and some of the ideas will actually be great. And you can make a show. That's how I started making my show about bipolar and psychosis, was by some middle of the night manic post-it thoughts.
yeah.
But so what happened is that I then decided I would make the show, and I was still a bit manic. So I applied for this scratch night thing where you got to try out your show. And then I forgot all about it. And then some months later, I got this kind of narky phone call going, well, do you want to do this or what? You haven't responded to any of our messages. So suddenly the theatre said, yeah, they wanted me to do it. And so I had no budget, I had no director, I had no nothing. And so then it was a case of kind of scurrying around, and luckily I've got some really lovely colleagues who are still working with me, who are not only very talented, but they have had their own experiences of supporting people with mental health issues. So I found a lovely director and my lovely producer that I work with, and I turned it into a show which I'm developing further now. And so yeah, that was a positive use of the energy from being a bit manic, but I wouldn't have been able to do the show safely whilst in that state.
Hmm.
So as a as an actor, it doesn't really matter what you feel, it's about what your audience feels. So there's no sense me being manic and crazy and that being for me. I've got to communicate that feeling to them and make them feel things. So you've got to find a way to then be able to do that show safely, no matter kind of, obviously I wouldn't do it if I was manic psychotic, and I wouldn't do it if I was incredibly depressed. But
Hmm.
within that range, there's got to be a way for me to safely do this show and make the audience feel things, but not feel all of those things myself.
Hmm.
So that's the working process at the moment. Um, I guess that would be advice really for any sort of content creation,
Hmm.
is don't take yourself back to somewhere traumatic. Don't take yourself back. Don't give all the stuff of yourself that's actually going to make you sick again.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
you don't owe the world your guts and your worst moments
yeah.
and or your most embarrassing moments. You
I mean, it
can.
could be tempting when you're just like, oh, what'll get me the most views and likes and comments.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that didn't even occur to me when I started out because I wasn't really in a
Yeah,
stable state of mind. And
right.
now I suppose I notice what gets the most traction. Um,
What
but
kind? What kind gets the most traction?
um, I think it's I find it hard to predict, because sometimes it'll be something that just comes to me. Like recently I did one that literally just sprung into my head, which is, what if I don't really have bipolar disorder, dot dot dot. So it's like, what if I don't really have bipolar disorder? It's a spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
What if I just duped 20 different psychiatrists into saying I had bipolar when I don't? It was it, and it turns out lots of people have those thoughts. So that
Mm,
kind of got quite a lot of, and then sometimes it's just useful information.
mhm.
So I just did one on how to get medication quickly if you've forgotten to bring it with you somewhere.
Yeah.
Or and so and also the explanations of bipolar disorder, the infographics people like. And I always look at how many saves, how many people have saved things, because that means they've found it useful and that they're keeping it for future reference.
Yeah.
So I suppose I'd go partly on how many people save or share the posts.
Hmm.
Because if you just go for likes, and to get likes, you just need a pretty picture, don't you, really? That's the
Yeah.
Instagram algorithm. Um,
Yeah. I think one of the things I'm taking from this question, which I've mentioned in my own writings, is it is it is a it can be somewhat of a superpower if you learn to control the energy. And if you are in a heightened state, to use all of the benefits, to take advantage of all the benefits that result from that heightened stage of energy, but then having the awareness on when to reel it back, because then it can turn into the dangerous levels of heightened energy. And like you mentioned, pouring out very traumatic, very deeply personal type of content. And then also even on the depressive end, if you're on a depressive slump, that can still be a source for creativity. But if you lean in on it too much and you don't pull back sooner rather than later, then it can get into the dangerous end of self-harm or harm to others. And I don't think any government or any physician will say to lean in on hypomania or depressive symptoms. And the purpose of this conversation is not to tell any, like, do's or don'ts, just because I like to cover my legal bases here. But these are two people, Polly and I, who are having a conversation about how to go about harnessing these energies for the purposes of creation, because the medical literature is filled with data showing that people who have this diagnosis tend to be creatives. So it just makes sense that, well, if we are inclined towards being creative, then you can lean on it. But I think I always add the point, and I think what you mentioned about the point of like not sharing things that can trigger mood episodes is a great guardrail to prevent the severe imbalances.
Yes, I mean, there's always a thing with art anyway, is that limitations are a good thing. So you
Mm.
actually set some parameters, and within that you can be more creative and more focused than if you just said, "Oh, we're going to do everything and everything's up for grabs." So I think you can make a decision about, I'm not going to go into these particular areas, and stick to that. And I think it helps if you have a
Yeah.
support network who
Yeah.
can say, wait a minute, you're straying too far into your, I'm a bit worried about you. You seem very agitated. You seem, you're talking very fast. Are you going high?
Mm.
Or I'm worried about you. You seem to be very low and you're speaking very slowly, and are you depressed? I think also there are quite good, I'm sure you have some because you're good at being boundaried and telling, sort of giving people ways to do that. Certainly Bipolar UK has not only a mood scale that you can chart your mood on, but it actually has suggestions that you could give to people as to how you would like to be treated in each state, which you do when you're stable, so that if you're not stable, people can spot the signs and try to help you in the right way.
Right. Right. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. That was brilliant. And then my last question for today, and an opportunity for you to talk about current and upcoming projects, is what's been the most rewarding part of sharing your journey with bipolar disorder?
Well, really, it's to just finding out that I'm not alone. I mean, that has been incredible to me. It sounds very obvious, but as I say, I think because I spent a lifetime hiding the fact that I had bipolar disorder and feeling ashamed, actually just to have this amazing community online now is massive for me. And what I want to do with that is to actually challenge stigma amongst the rest of the population. And I'm making a show about bipolar and in particular psychosis, because I think that word really puts the wind up people and I want to dispel the terror around that word, psychosis. So it's a show called How to Go Crazy for Good, and it uses comedy and it uses some actual neuroscience and it uses a variety of silly props and a PowerPoint presentation that goes disastrously wrong. And it's, I suppose the short tagline would be psychosis, but make it funny. And the reason that I want people to find it funny is partly to dispel the terror. And also, apparently, if you make people laugh, they retain information better.
Yeah.
So, and I want particularly to reach 18 to 25-year-olds because that's when symptoms of bipolar are quite likely to appear. The people who look after them, their families and their university tutors. And I would love to reach trainee medics because I think there's a real lack of knowledge about lived experience of bipolar and psychosis. So that is another sort of target group. And also, I hope to turn it eventually into an actual theatre show because that's my profession. That's what I do,
Hmm.
and to thereby reach a much more general group of people. There would always be either the idea is to then have a moderated discussion after the show so people can ask questions. And then I want to do what I call a mad cafe, which is that you have a cup of tea, it's a very casual environment, and people can ask things they were too shy to ask in the moderated discussion. So yeah, I suppose it's spreading information, dispelling stigma, and making people laugh is really the what I want the show
Through,
to do.
yeah, through your art, through the shows. And you've mentioned theater, but are these current shows, these are shows or television or
Yeah,
movies?
no, this would be live, but it's a show that will be adaptable. My company makes immersive theatre, so we've done shows on an oil rig off Brighton Beach, or in
Oh,
woodlands, or in the Selfridges shop window on Oxford Street, or much more intimate settings as well. So I'm seeing this as an immersive show, and really the main conceit is this PowerPoint presentation that goes wrong because the PowerPoint's my brain, so it kind of glitches and then I have to pull the show together from post-its and props and things. So there's a PowerPoint presentation that can be done as almost a talk. There'll be a sort of educational version of it that can go into universities or bipolar support groups or whatever. And then there will be a kind of stage presentation version that can be played to a bigger audience. And I'd like to do an online version because I know a lot of the people I meet on socials don't live in the UK, so it would be great to have an online version ready to go as well. That's the plan.
amazing. Amazing. No, that's great to see that you're doing advocacy work through a creative, through the arts.
Yes, I mean the other thing I'm doing at the moment is I'm trying to find a way to protest the cuts to disability benefits that are happening in the UK. So I suppose that's pure. It's
Can
not
you
pure
can you
activism.
talk a little bit more about that? Because I'm
Yeah.
stateside, so I'm not familiar with what's going on.
Yeah, so there are various ways that disabled people are supported by the state in the UK. One of which is the personal independence payments, a PIP, which you have to score. It's a very brutal, it's a very long form you have to fill out. Then you have to go through a really brutal and intrusive assessment. And if you score enough points, you get a really quite small sum of money per week to cover the fact that it's more expensive to be disabled than it is to not be disabled. The So the criteria, so it's not an unemployment benefit, it's just to it could help you to do work. It's just to recognise the added costs of being disabled. There used to be a certain amount of point that at the moment there's a certain amount of points you have to score to get uh, the either daily living allowance or mobility allowance or both. And they've just decided to raise what you need to get on the daily living allowance, which will affect people with physical health problems as well as mental health problems. Um, it will set the bar even. It's a very high bar already, and it will set it even higher. So lots of people will lose out on their benefits, which for a lot of people will mean that they become much sicker and or lose their lives, I'm afraid, because they can't work or they can't earn enough. Uh,
What is the name of the policy or the act that has changed?
so the benefit, this is a particular benefit, which is personal independence payment. And you also get the general in the UK, the general sort of low waged or unemployed benefit is universal credit, which it tops up your earnings if you're a low earning. That's anyone. That's you don't have to be disabled for that. That's anyone who earns a very low amount. And there's also a limited capacity for work related activity benefit, which they're threatening as well. And they're threatening to reduce the amount of the universal credit. So that's three benefits that help poor and disabled people that they're either cutting or massively reducing. And
That just adds so much more meaning to your work. Um,
yeah, I mean it's quite daunting. They're also cutting carers allowance, I think. So it's a sort of treble whammy in that disabled people won't be able to work because they won't have enough support, money to support to do that. So it won't get people back into work, which is what the government are saying. Their carers, they'll be thrown back on being cared for by their family, the unpaid carers, who now won't even be able to get carers allowance. So none of it makes any sense unless they're literally trying to kill people, in my opinion.
yeah,
So kind of like eugenics. You go, right, if you're to say you have to work, they call themselves the party of work. You have to work. If you can't work, you die. That's how it seems to me at the moment. Okay, I'm quite black and white about it, but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
horrible.
It's a
Uh,
lot to deal with the system and the just yeah, it's a lot.
and yeah, and it promotes this gross ableism that your productivity is your worth, that if you can't pay taxes, then you aren't part of society and
Yeah,
you're really a lesser being and you should probably crawl off and die. I mean, that is some of
yeah,
the rhetoric that's
yeah,
coming
yeah.
from people online. And I think it's
Well,
disgraceful, disgusting, and I'll do everything in my power to fight
hmm,
that. Obviously, I'm one person, so I'm trying to reach out and get groups of people together to
yeah.
test all
So
this.
shows, clothes, and highs and lows. That's been a very good um, introduction to all of this. And we've covered our questions for the day, and I always like to invite the guests before we conclude to make any final remarks, any burning, uh, you know, statements that either they wanted to say beforehand or it came up during that they haven't had a chance to say, someone who is struggling with the acute phases of bipolar and they might be feeling alone. Um, what do any final message, what do you have for them?
Well, you're not alone. You're definitely not alone. There's a community online that really wants to help you and always reach out and ask for help rather than struggling in silence. And also, I'd like to say, because if you're young and you've just been diagnosed, and from what I've said, you might think that I've had a terrible life. I haven't. I've had a really lovely life in most ways. I've worked with really interesting people on very exciting projects. I have a lovely husband who I've been with for 9 years who loves me dearly, and Kobe is probably the best thing that's happened to me in my life, and I'm very lucky. So I've had, I don't want to say highs because that's the wrong thing in this context. I have had mostly a really lovely life for which I'm really grateful. Bipolar disorder doesn't need to stop you from having, it may not be the life you planned, but you can still have a really good life.
Hmm. That's inspiring. That's so even for me, that's lovely to hear.
I'm glad.
Thank you, Polly. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your wisdom, sharing your experiences, sharing your personal approach and how you use social media to address stigma around mental illness, advocating for more rights. and being someone who a lot of people will never come out because of the stigma and because of the effects on career, but you've taken that risk, and while it may have certain stigma and taboo things that you deal with, I see that you lean on the positive side, that you see how many people you're helping with your content. And I think I'm the similar as well. It's like sometimes people are like, "Oh no, no, don't say you have BP." I'm like, "Well, it's a word, and it helps explain. It's a very intense experience. I don't have the diagnosis anymore, but that's always a debatable point, you know. It's like I thought it was something that you always have for the rest of your life, and I'm trying to advocate for something different, and you're advocating. But I think the more people are talking about mental illness, all of the things that you're saying, we are doing it by having these live conversations and broadcasting them for people who are struggling in silence.
Yes, indeed. And also I think it is spreading awareness because I think a lot of the population still doesn't know what bipolar disorder is. It's
Yeah.
quite a misunderstood thing. And whether you want to call it that for yourself or not, it labels can be helpful in terms of being able to explain something to people. And I think it's always better to spread awareness if you can, if you're in a place where you can do that and free yourself a bit of the kind of weight of that secret.
Well, thank you so much, Polly. Maybe in the
Thank
future,
you.
we'll do some more work together.
Yes, I always love to collaborate with people, so it's been really
Okay.
a pleasure to talk to you today.
Well, until next time, take care.
And you.